Good morning, everyone. Welcome to American Scouser's Morning Coffee or Tea with American Scouser, brought to you by Reckless Coffee. We are back on a Monday. Grumpy is back. And after a weekend with no Liverpool or amateur or anything, he's a little grumpy. I know you're definitely grumpier than I am, Matush. What's happening?
Oh, I'm not grumpy. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I'm doing well. I am just here. I'm glad to be back. I missed last Monday, and I'm glad to be back. I hope everything went well. I wasn't able to watch it because I was at work.
Oh, I'll keep you up to date. We'll talk a lot about international soccer over here. But before we forget, good morning, Alan, as the gang gathers on over here. Before we do forget, head on over and like and subscribe, especially our YouTube channel if you have not subscribed to it. Because as Bickler
Like and
says,
subscribe, smash that like button. Like and subscribe, smash that like button.
yes. So listen to Bickler. Head on over to YouTube and subscribe over there. Give us a like. Those go a long way, especially on a Monday morning over here. So not a lot of headlines. I noticed. When we were both looking for headlines, it was a lot of media trying to make news out of like weird stuff. Ryan says, "Good morning. Went to the United Center last night to see fish. Got home at 3. Went into work at 6. Still kind of stoned. Good morning." Well, there's no other way to be on a Monday morning, is what I've been told at least. So we're rolling with that. But yeah,
And no other way to see fish unless you're completely stoned.
that's the other part of that. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So not a lot of headlines, but there's a couple of like interesting topics that we can talk about. So the first was, before we get to the international misery for you, because I wanted to get your take on that. The first was Henderson over the national break being booed uh, for England when he's, mind you, like. So let's start with that. He acts like when they asked him initially, he was like, "I don't know why. Do you?" Kind of a thing. Like he is not clear on why he's being booed. I am sure he kind of has a really good idea. Maybe he doesn't understand why the reaction is so bad.
He said it later in the little interview. He's like talking about how not everyone's going to agree with choices that I make about going over to play in Saudi Arabia. It's like, dude, you know exactly why they're booing then. So don't come out and say, "Oh, I don't know why they're booing me. I just don't want them to." He knows. He just doesn't want them to boo him. And I think the saddest part that we're all figuring out is that I think the club, Liverpool, curated this image of this guy that we fell in love with. And it turns out that he was just a fucking idiot all along. You know, one of those things where you have this guy that you really respect because this club put him up on these pedestals and had him be the captain and had him do this for this charity, this for this charity, speak out about this, speak out about this. But then when he doesn't have any of that behind him and he has his own PR team or lack of, I don't know what he has, you find out that it was sort of all a facade, and it just goes back to football players being football players.
Oh, see, that's an interesting take. So you're saying actually it wasn't really Henderson all along. Liverpool is like, "Hey, we got this event we need you to go to and stuff." But he's done a lot behind the scenes as well. It's almost like he was this guy, but just could not say no to the money. Or you're under the belief that he really wasn't this guy, and like he was just playing the role.
I think that's just me trying to cope with everything still. And there's not necessarily, that's not the most accurate way to think that this is how the situation unfolded. But there might be a part of it where I just feel like maybe his charitableness wasn't that great, but the club made it better. You know, he still did some good things, but he wasn't really that guy on that level that we expected him to be outside of football.
That's fair. I mean, I think that's where we're at, right? Because you would think, or is there a price for any conviction? Like if it was up there with that conviction, he was like, "Well, I can't say no to that." And I think, okay, let me ask you this. If he flat out came out and said, "Hey, you know what? I understand all that, but this is like financial offer I can't refuse. I will definitely use the money to support the cause and stuff. It's not about, uh, you know, it's not about just going over there to support what Saudis are doing. It's more like a financial decision, but I will use the money for the good and stuff. Do you think he still gets booed? Is he getting booed because he kind of like acts like he's in denial?
I think more so the latter, because if he was more transparent, and I think even if originally he did come out saying, "Hey, I'm going over there for the money," the initial reaction would be like, "What the fuck, Hendo?" But then afterwards we go, "Okay, yeah, we get it. He's put in X amount of years. He got this offer of money that he would have probably never dreamt of receiving in his life. Okay, he goes on and does that." And we all sort of overall, and not just Liverpool fans, because this is extending to English fans in general. And so we all sort of sit back and go, all right, well, he just did it for the money. Fine. But it's the fact that you have him criticizing Qatar and what they did before the World Cup, and then now saying, yeah, Saudi Arabia should host the World Cup because I think everyone's going to have a great time. It's like you can't get from point A to point B and think that there was nothing in between that would have changed your opinion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's what I'm torn at. Like, people booing, would they act any differently if he owned up to it? But I think he's in a situation kind of like what you're saying. It's really hard to own up to it because it's such a 180 in terms of like everything you did. Chris says it's just funny that stories are dropping that players are unhappy there. Hardly surprising when they got worse following that League Two teams. I mean, here's the thing. I'm at the same time, I take that as, like ridiculously rich people always say, like, money doesn't bring happiness. You're like, well, let me give it a shot. Obviously, it didn't work out for you. Let us have a couple of billion, and then we'll give it a shot, see if it works better for us. Is it that kind of a thing where they're like, yeah, guys, we're getting great money over here, but we're not really happy. It's all about the fans kind of a thing? Or, I mean, obviously, you're not going to be. What did you expect? I guess is the other question.
Maybe they expected more fans once they brought in so many names. I think if you're going over there and you think that this product is being created and you're having all of these teams bring in all of these names from around the world, you're expecting that the people in that country care enough to come and then see those players live. But it kind of comes down to Ronaldo or not Ronaldo. I feel like, there's so many. I think maybe I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I am knowledgeable on the extent of fandom in the Saudi Pro League, but I don't know how many teams beyond the top four, the government-controlled ones, have actual good attendance records, because maybe it is these teams have money, these fans come and see these teams deal. I know that all the teams have money to an extent, but the top four government-funded ones have the absurd amount of money where they're getting in the likes of, they can put in Ronaldo and Mane on the same team and all that stuff. So I don't know if it's basically just those four that get the most fandom and the rest no one really cares about. And then you see the attendance records of, less than 5,000 people. But then you would think that if the top four clubs were coming into play away at those other clubs that are not as funded, that you would have more fans show up because of the bigger names. But I think maybe in general, it just, maybe the Saudi people just want good Saudi players and not necessarily want to see everyone else from around the world come in and overtake the league. I don't know. It's hard. I feel like it would be really nice to sit down with someone who's actually who's been in Saudi Arabia, who's followed the league for a decade, let's say, and kind of understand from their side how they're viewing, or maybe they know of fans of how they're viewing these changes, and if it is a positive or negative thing for the fans there overall.
Yeah, because I don't know, like Turkey had the same thing in the past where they're like, oh, by bringing in international players. And actually, this does work to an extent, right? By bringing in good players from outside. Because growing up, I think you could only have like 3 foreign players or something like that. Now I think you can have 8 in your starting 11. So you have to have at least 3 Turkish players in your starting 11. That's the rule now, which keeps changing. But there's like a ton of international players. So when you bring, it kind of goes both ways. You bring in quality. So we always talk about, so that's what the Turkish young players practice against and learn from. I don't know, if you're a young player in Fenerbahce, for example, you're learning from Tadic and Dzeko and stuff like that, how to play the game and like, little intricacies and stuff like that. But at the same time, if you're a young Turkish player from Fenerbahce, you're not playing because Tadic is playing over there. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So it kind of goes both ways. I don't know if the Saudis really did it to like improve their soccer. To me, it always felt like it was more like pay to have the circus come over. Like, you know, why don't you give a concert over here kind of thing to give a bunch of players money to come play over here because we're not coming all the way over there. I mean, Chris says, so we're taking Chris's word on this because I have no idea either. I'm not following these numbers, but so the highest is about 25 and they average about 5,000. So if you are a Bobby, a Mane, a Benzema, or whoever, or whoever really, I mean, even if you're Neves, you're used to a lot more than that when you come out. I guess at the same time, did you think you were going to fill the stadiums? You think they really thought, hey, when we go there, man, people are just going to come out and horde and like watch us 50,000 at a time.
Let me ask you, do you think these players were aware of the attendance record to begin with? Or did you think that maybe because of the sport that they've played in every part of their career, there have been huge crowds because that's just part of the sport? Do you think that they just expected that and didn't necessarily think that there were problems with attendance, that they wouldn't be playing in front of people?
I would guess they had no idea. Right? I don't think they thought.
I would have to think so, yeah.
Here's the thing, you know, when you're selling the concept to your agent, blah, 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 the footage you get, it's like a YouTube video of a player. You don't get all the missed passes. You get all the perfect passes. You know, you get all the shots that hit on target. You don't get the ones that are way off and sky high. So I would assume they were like, look at these crazy fans. And, you know, footage from like the cup final or something like that they had over there. And then that's what they thought they were going into. I just don't think. I don't even know. I mean, here's another thing, though. I don't even know if that was a thing that came up. Like, if they're like, hey, here's, I mean, it's not even a briefcase at this point. Here's like 10 suitcases of cash we brought for you. They were like, wait, though. How many people in the stands? I don't even think that's even coming up.
Yeah. So then I guess going back to your question, then their expectations were just not, that's not what they were thinking of at all. And maybe deep down, it was always about the fans. Let's not get ridiculous. Okay, I get it.
Take a bow, my friend. Take a bow.
Yeah, no, let's not be ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just athletes play the sports they play because A, they're really good at the sport, and B, they make money playing the sport. And I think sometimes there is a level of emotion that comes from the fans. So I think maybe for some of these players who have been around so much high emotion of the sport, when you take into consideration the fans, that maybe there's just a little piece of that emotion that feels like it's missing. And it might be one of those moments where you just think back and go, well, I still am making a lot of money, but I really wish there was more emotionally.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe I mean, here's the thing. All these players, ultimately, when they play, especially like the top ones at the top level and stuff like that, they kind of feed off of the environment, the fans, the reaction and stuff like that, good or bad. Like and in any sport, even in here, like you talk to like an NFL player, an NBA player, I mean, they kind of live it's one thing to just drain a basket. It's one thing to drain a basket and have the place explode. Or I remember like Kobe saying, for example, he enjoyed playing away because the feeling that he liked more than the crowd going crazy was everybody shutting up, the power of shutting the place down and stuff like that. So all these players ultimately play for the moment to be able to, once they have the moment. I mean, yeah, you do something over the top or you create a moment that's special and then you turn around, it's like 10 guys in the back like you're like, yay.
They all have those the pads that you have clicking the buttons for the sounds going around the stadium.
I mean, I can understand how that would be a turnoff once you're used to the other one. And here's another thing: the players that are going there are used to the highs of the highs, so they're not like it's not like getting a guy from like the second Dutch league or something like that for a young talent. They're bringing guys who play Champions League finals and all that kind of stuff, like World Cup finals, played all the big games to big stands. So when those guys go out to a small crowd of 5,000, I'm sure it's like a wah, wah, wah kind of a moment where they're like, oh, okay, I guess we'll play kind of thing.
Should have gone to the MLS.
Yeah. Alan says, even if the Saudis get the World Cup, attendances will still fall back to regular numbers. And that's another thing. Like the moment I saw the Saudi World Cup thing, I know a couple of people I read in the comments saying like, oh, that's why they're doing this pro league. I don't buy that because let's face it, you get the World Cup by paying money instead of paying the players. They could have just paid FIFA and gotten the World Cup anyway.
Yeah, they could have saved a lot more money along the way. I feel like it's a we did talk about this over the summer about how if signing all these players is a way of legitimizing the league. And I think there is a part to the country overall where they did perhaps want to legitimize the league, but maybe not so much to the Western world because they can still buy their way into the World Cup, but more so for a way to be able to maybe build the league, legitimize it, and then be able to grow players from within their country to have a country then respectable enough on the world stage of playing against other teams and not just being sort of like a laughing stock of having so much population but not having any players to produce. Poland, shit like that. I'm not bitter at all, but yeah, I think part of it was just I think there was a genuine attempt to legitimize the league in a way to then inspire a generation of players from their own country, because like you said, they can just pay their way to have a World Cup. I don't think that they have to waste so much money on players' salary along the way.
Yeah, I don't think those are related at all. Some people were trying to connect the dots. I was like, first of all, that's too long of a long-term planning. That's unnecessary. Because here's the thing, like if you started doing that now, I can see them kind of like interrupting or disturbing the European leagues to get attention, if you will. But I don't think there's a connection because we all know how FIFA works. So there's a lot of other ways of cash distribution, better ways of cash distribution, I should say, to get the World Cup than just give it $1 dollars to players. This was all about bringing the circus to town, hoping it grows into something. But the difference, like you mentioned, like Major League Soccer, for example, I feel like the difference between Major League Soccer and there is you're not going to get people more interested in soccer over there than they already are. It is the sport. Over here, I think you can kind of sell the concept that it's a growing sport and the attendances will go up over time. I don't know what you can do over there at this point. If this is not doing it, I don't know what would increase attendance. It's totally different than the challenges that Major League Soccer has over here.
Extending the Champions League to include clubs from over there and having Real Madrid and Bayern Munich and Liverpool and United and City and Barcelona come to play there. That might be the only way, because if you can get Ronaldo, Benzema, Mane, Firmino, Jordan Henderson to come over there and play, and that's not boosting your numbers, then you're right. Where do you go from there to make it more appealing? Because you're getting some big names who are, yes, some of them are a little over the hill, but others, like the Jota kid from Celtic, he's 21. Like some of these guys, Neves, he's 27. Some of these guys are still either reaching their prime or in their prime. I don't know what else you have to do to make it more appealing.
Yeah, I don't know if it will be. Like, if Real Madrid comes, you're going to fill that stadium, the stadium there when they play a Real or they play a top game. But then, when El Ittifaq plays Al Nassr or whatever, it's going to be, you're going to go back to the same thing, the default settings, if you will. So it's going to be interesting what their next step is going to be. I mean, I don't know a lot of the details of the whole golf thing. I don't know if you're a golf. You look like you could be a golf guy. No?
What does that mean?
You know what that means. But
Jordan Henderson. I don't know what that means, but I know what that means.
Why are they booing me? Yeah, so I know they kind of see. Hello, says Turkey. We're gonna have to get to this Turkish national team, Polish national team thing.
Can we not?
Up next. Actually, like it's an interesting thing that I do want to ask everyone involved. Actually, because I think this goes for anybody who does something. Bickler says it means you own pleated pants. Oh man,
I had
that's
the
like the
button.
second Bickler appearance today after the soundbite earlier. So it's the gift that gift keeps on giving. Okay, let's get to this national team thing because I'm sure this Saudi League thing is going to come up anyway. We'll always go back to it. So here's the interesting thing. So Turkey qualified for the Euros after like winning 2 games basically during this international break. The big one was against Croatia. Yesterday, they beat Latvia 4-0. 4-0 makes it sound like they blew them out, but it was some tense moments in 1-0, and then they score like 3 towards the end of the game. And they win the group now. As of now, they're like 6 points ahead of everybody. And a sweet cardigan says, well, dude, it must be. It's almost like that screen is not there, and they can see your like closet in the background. The green screen is not working almost. The odd thing is Turkey changed coaches. You would think a team that's winning the group and, you know, way ahead. I mean, when this group first came out, everyone's going like, okay, Croatia is going to win this group. Who's going to be second? Is it going to be Turkey? Is it going to be Wales, Armenia? That was the discussion. So now they're winning the group, but oddly, they changed managers 2 matches ago. Like basically 2 weeks ago, they changed managers. I mean, coaches, whatever you want to call them. And then the new dude comes in, and the comedy is, and this is how this ties to Liverpool as well, by the way. So this dude came to Turkey, Italian Monatella, I believe his name is. He came to Turkey only because Balotelli, who was playing in Adana Demirspor when he came to Turkey, and he is back there, by the way. He was playing for Adana Demirspor. He got his coach fired. Surprise, surprise. He was a Turkish manager.
Mario,
you guys should go get this guy. Like he brought his own manager, basically, almost like bringing your own chef to the club. He went and brought his own manager, and the dude kind of like made like a really good team over there. They had a lot of offensive talent and stuff. That's how he got introduced to Turkish soccer. So if he's manager of Turkey right now, he only has Balotelli to thank, because otherwise nobody in Turkey would have ever heard of this dude. He was out there somewhere in Italy. But I mean, everybody's talking about like the impact he made, and you could visually see an impact, but ultimately it's the same players for the most part, 80% of it and stuff. You guys obviously in Poland kind of like are struggling through the group phases right now, probably kind of like unexpectedly, I should say, because I think they were the ones probably slated to win that group as well.
Yeah.
How much of an impact do you think a manager makes on the national team? We've talked about before about, in the club level, but in the national team stage, how much of an impact do you think a manager makes?
It's a good question, because there's 2 case studies, right? There's the case study of the Turkish national team, where you bring in the new manager, everything is still swimming the same way. You're still going the same way down the stream that you were swimming before. And then there's the Polish national team, where you have a manager and you fire him, you bring in a new guy, and you can't beat Moldova. So I don't know if where it lies. I think ultimately the players, I think you need the right manager to pick the right players, to select the right players to represent the team during that time period. But I think if you are able to choose the right players, you can get by with a subpar manager, because you will arguably have the best of the best from your country. And as long as there's some sort of a system that is recognizable enough to all of them, where I think if the simpler the system you have, the easier it goes, because you don't have to rely on these players playing a completely difficult, maybe intricate system that could be 180 degrees different from what they play at the club level, to have them come in and play a different way. If you sort of are able to bring in guys who are able to play a fluid enough system where it doesn't change too much from their club level, and they're still talented enough to represent your country, I don't know if the manager makes as much of a difference during the game itself. I think the big part of the manager for the national team is just selection and bringing in the right guys, and not having loyalties to guys that have been there for 10 years just because they've been on the national team for 10 years. Like being able to actually recognize and say, hey, this guy he's old, he's done. Like we need something new here. We can't just keep bringing him in because he scored one fucking goal against Russia 8 years ago. Now we owe him the world.
I knew this was going to bring a lot of bitterness, this discussion, but I am enjoying it. Okay, let me ask you this then. The new guy comes in for Poland. Does he call a totally number of different players than what was called before? Or is it pretty much the same thing with 2-3 new dudes?
I was going to defend him and say that it was new, but Lewandowski was hurt, so you couldn't call on him anyway. But there were a couple guys like Krychowiak, who has been with the team for 12 years now, and he did not call him up for this latest round. And so there were 2 or 3 decisions he made that really impacted the veterans, so to speak. And I think overall it was nice to give an opportunity to some younger kids who deserve a chance. If the group already is not going so well and you don't really know what you have as far as the capability of your team and who is good enough to represent your club at that or your team at that level, then by at least bringing in some newer players to see what they're made of, for lack of a cliche term, to see what they're made of. But it's nice to get that. Whereas with previous managers, there wasn't enough of that, where I felt like they owed so much to the veterans that got them there that they never tried anything new. And then you were stuck because then the next competition, the next qualifiers come around and you don't have anyone new. You don't know where to go from there because the guys that you just had are 2 years older and you don't know what you can get from anyone else because you've never given them a chance.
Yeah, because I think in the national teams, there's a lot more clicks, if you will, and you don't have as much. I think that's like the biggest difference, right? You can bring, that's why when they talked about, Klopp and stuff like that, I think we discussed it then. I just don't think he fits a national team manager perspective because you need to instill a culture. And that sometimes is like a whole overdue over like a couple of seasons. Like you turn the squad over, maybe accept a couple of players kind of a deal, which obviously you can't do that in the national team because like who's the best at that time is not going to change that drastically in 2 years. And I feel like, and this is like what, I feel like happened in the Turkish team. It's the same pretty much people. I mean, he just changed like 2-3 people in the squad and maybe took a guy like Çağlar Soyuncu out and Merih Demiral out and stuff like that and put it actually, I mean, here's the thing. It's like risky business. He put in a center back who used to play for him, who doesn't even play for Fenerbahce right now. He comes off the bench like the last 10 minutes of the game. He's like the Gomez of Fenerbahce, but he started him for the national team. So if things don't go well, a lot of people could be like, dude, what the hell is this? I mean, I said when I saw him in the starting 11, I'm like, is this our Summit? Because I saw the name, but there was no last name. I was like, is this
going to be a brother?
Dude? Yeah, I'm just like, what the hell? But I think in the national team, it's more about, I almost feel like it's more about getting the manager that's going to make, for example, in Poland, Lewandowski and the old gang happy while he can maybe tweak some things. I don't think you're getting a manager over there to be successful if your boy Lewandowski does not like him, for example. And I know, I mean, in the audience, if you guys are, I mean, I'm sure you guys are a lot more familiar with the U.S. national team than I am. I always see like, comments and stuff like that. But I'll be honest, I don't know the players to know, why isn't that guy getting a chance or whatever, like he's playing in Germany, he's playing there and stuff. I don't know if it's like the same thing in every country where it's almost like there's like a core clique that's always selected. And it feels like they run the show overall, and it goes as far as those guys will take him. And those guys sometimes stop and say, we're not going anywhere with this dude. And then that's when that dude gets changed. And it looks like, oh, he brought so much energy to the team. No, not really. The clique is now trying to work for him, whereas they were not before.
Yeah. Or there's also this part of it that is sometimes just really hard to accept. Your country just doesn't produce good soccer players. Like, that is where I'm at. Like Matty Cash, we had to go to England to find someone to play on the wing for us. And he barely plays as a wing back. He plays as a winger essentially for the Polish national team. Like we just don't have the talent. I don't know what it is because we've talked about this before. The country is so obsessed with the sport. The next closest sport's probably volleyball, which they actually do dominate. They are typically in the top 4 world rankings of volleyball every year. They recently won the Worlds. I think it was last year. And so between these two sports, they're the most obsessed about these sports. But for some reason, and I don't know what it is, and I implore anyone else to try and figure it out for me, why you can't just get a group of 11 guys that can at least compete at a level that they should be competing at. Because if you have the population, 38 million, let's say half of those are eligible to play, or men, and maybe another half of those are eligible. You've got 8.5, 9 million guys to potentially choose from, and you can't get 11 guys that are good enough to represent your country at a level where they should be representing you. Then that's a much deeper issue than just the manager. It's just an overall talent issue, and I don't know how you fix that. It starts at the ground level, the grassroots level. It starts from the youth. I think the golden, besides the 80s where Poland finished 3rd in the World Cup, the golden age, so to speak, that everyone was excited for was 6 to 8 years ago, when you had Błaszczykowski, Lewandowski, Piszczek, Grosicki, Krychowiak, like all these guys who were playing at big clubs, who actually were playing really well, and they were playing well together, and there was a lot of buzz. They lost to Portugal the year that Portugal won the Euros, and that felt like, after that loss to Portugal and seeing Portugal win, sort of just blew up everything that they worked for, because it almost felt like that was the time, and then now they've got nothing. And I don't know what happened past that point, but it's just overall just a talent issue, I think, for Poland specifically.
Well, that's the thing. I think in a lot of national teams that happens. Ryan says it's the same problem in the U.S. I don't know if he means in terms of selection or like being able to come up with. I mean, obviously, part of it is, like hitting the magic formula. There's obviously, you have a lot of guys, getting the right guys in there. Where they play makes a difference. I know, I don't know if that was a thing in Poland. I see that a little bit in the U.S., to be honest with you. Like, there is a thing between players who play here and players who play in Europe. Because sometimes the guys in Europe come back as, you guys don't know. Which, I mean, they might be right for a certain extent, but still they come with a built-in attitude. I mean, if they had that attitude, maybe the guy over here is expecting that attitude, so he perceives everything that way. Because I know that was the same case in Turkey when like a lot of these guys were over there. And, if Hakan Çalhanoğlu is in Inter Milan, and if he comes back, and even if he's saying something normally, everybody takes it as, oh, because you play for Milan, kind of a thing. So
look at this guy.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, don't you? But I think that's changed over time. And honestly, like, the luckiest thing that the Turkish national team has, for example, and I think that sometimes goes with that is, Fenerbahce and Galatasaray right now, because they started their season really early with the qualifiers, they're on ridiculous peak form, probably too early to be in peak form right now compared to everybody else. So, and now I think probably 70% of the starting 11 is out of those clubs. So you're playing guys who are in form, in top peak shape right now. Obviously, it's kind of like, the pay to play in the US is a problem. Yes.
We could have a whole morning show on the problem with the sport in the US. And it's bad.
Would you say it's pay to play in Poland?
No.
Okay. Yeah. I think in Europe it's a bit, but here's the thing. While it's a bit less, because I think everybody is playing the game, you have to admit a 14-year-old who's in a club getting professional coaching is going to develop a lot faster than a dude who just grabs the ball every day and goes out and plays.
Most likely, unless the professional coach is not. You could be a professional coach and not be a good coach. Like, it depends on where the coaching is still coming from at the end of the day.
I mean, over here too. I mean, the pay to play. I mean, we've been,
the kids are being paid to play for a coach who is just a coach on the side who barely understands the rules of the game.
Yes. I mean, it does happen. Like, you play against, we played against clubs, and it's all in, and that's why it's a pay to play, right? Because there are clubs that charge $1,000 a year for your kids. There are clubs who charge $3,000 a year. Yeah. There are ones who charge $5,000 a year. So the level of coaching, we played against teams that, charge a lot less. and you get what you pay for in terms of coaching. Because the dude, yeah, like you're saying, barely knows the rules or doesn't really make an impact. He's not going to really teach you anything. Who tries to puts the fast, strong kid up top so that, they play for the score rather than to train the players and stuff. Whereas you can pay a lot more and lose, but actually the team is getting better and you can see your kid getting better because they're getting coaching and stuff.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's like
development.
But if I had you pick a national team coach, that's what I was going to go with this. Like, what are you looking for? Like, what do you want? Do you want an ex-player? Do you want somebody young? Do you want somebody old? Do you want somebody who did something? Or do you want somebody who's just, like, what is the characteristic? Because we talked about this before for the club manager, but I feel like this is such a different category.
World Cup winning managers. Let's see.
The Polish Soccer Federation is not hiring like this.
Let me take Lionel Scaloni, Didier Deschamps, Joachim Löw, Vicente Del Bosque, Marcelo Lippi.
You want someone who's been there, done that to win it.
Just looking at those four names. I mean, I guess, can you argue that Lionel Scaloni was there and did it? I don't know. It's because if you do look at the list of World Cup winning managers, it's not necessarily ex-players who played at a high level. There are ex-players, but not players that were, you could say were the world-class players of their time. I think a good balance between someone who is experienced enough to play a specific system, but also has an emotional impact with the players enough that they can have a relationship with them without needing to be too buddy day to day. So not quite Jurgen Klopp buddy, but maybe more so who
give me a Premier League manager, for example. You're like, you know what? I'll take that guy for my coach.
To coach Poland right now.
Yeah.
It's Sean Dyche at this point. Let's see.
Beat somebody's ass over there.
I think maybe that's a good question.
You're like
Marco Silva.
Marco
Silva. I think.
I like that.
I think Marco Silva has enough experience tactically, but also is someone who will defend his players, but he's not so. This is just from the outside looking in because we're not Fulham fans specifically, so we see how that happens. But someone who is there for his players at the clubhouse, but not strictly relationship based, because there's still a tactical force that he has to go along with him.
Dude, the
Zerbi.
See, I feel like a guy like that is very similar to Klopp, where they need time to instill a system. That's why I feel like as players change, the system stays the same. That's a lot harder to do in a national team. It's almost like you're trying to make a mix of whatever is given to you. You're not going to change a player seeing him like 2 weeks a year. So you're trying to either you're going to select people that fit your system, and that does not really work in the national team, because if he didn't pick Lewandowski because he doesn't fit the system, that's not going to fly. So there are certain restrictions in terms of like picking the players. You can't be like, oh, it's not my system. It's one thing, in the club level, you can sell that guy and get another guy, and you can keep going, but you can't do that in the national team. Hassan says, but I mean, that's the thing. It's easy to do that when you have a culture and you're just bringing guys in to fit your system. You can't really do that as much because you have to adjust your system a little bit. I think when you were talking about earlier in terms of flexibility, that's where that comes into play.
Yeah, because as a national team, you don't have the flexibility to go out to, if you're a European country, to go scout in South America and bring in some of these guys like Brighton has done, because their recruiting, I would argue, has been better than their coaching. Because when you've had Graham Potter and De Zerbi come in and be able to do the job that they've done with the players that the club has brought in, I think it's the recruitment that is most important. And you can only recruit so much in your own country. You can't, unless you go to England to find Matty Cash and find anyone with a living great grandparent that has any connection Hey, your great grandfather one time stepped foot in Warsaw. Do you want to play for Poland?
And I think that's usually because I love when like players announce which country they're going to play for because they wait as late as possible.
They need the hats like the college kids. Polish hat, English hat, whatever hat. They're just okay.
And it's usually because, okay, well, there's no way I'm even getting selected for England. You know what? I've been Polish all along, actually, kind of a thing is what happens. I mean, it happens the same thing with Turkey. Like they're German until Germany national team doesn't want them. And then they're suddenly like, my dad, I've always been Turkish kind of a thing. And they come back. But Hassan says, I think that's a good point. Like in the States, the sports are mostly developed at college level, then drafted to play professionally. Only the guys who go to Europe will be good to play in the national team. I feel like the problem is you're losing those guys way earlier. And so a 10-year-old who could be a star doesn't end up being a star because he can't pay to play. And then the other guy who can pay, who's worse than the other kid maybe, ends up at that level, but you missed out on somebody who could have been better.
And I disagree with the fact that sports are mostly developed at college level. I think some sports are, but if you look at football, NFL football, basketball, and baseball, those three sports are developed very young, very early. And there's a lot of focus on development in those three sports from an early age. So I don't necessarily agree with the fact that most of the sports are developed at a college level because it depends on the sport. If we're talking soccer, yes, I agree with that because there isn't much else to develop there because there isn't anywhere to develop them until they get to a certain level. But when you look at the three major sports here, kids are developing in those sports from 4, 5, 6 years old.
Yeah, I think with anything really, like even with soccer, I feel like, a kid. I mean, I know, like I say this for my girls, like I feel like the earlier you start with professional coaching, the better you end up being. And then the more you can pay, the better you get. So I think by the time they go to the college, you got the kid who was able to mostly spend the money to get there, especially in soccer, I think. Whereas you're losing out on a bunch of kids who would have been something, but they just never are because they don't have coaching. Like you can see raw talent. You can see they love the game. You can see they grab. I mean, growing up in Turkey, you just grab the soccer ball. That's what you play all the freaking time. Yeah. But there's difference between playing the game all the freaking time and maybe you develop some certain skills. But like tactically, physically, even like, like core basics, you're not getting that foot skills and stuff like that unless, somebody's constantly coaching it and preaching it and stuff like that. So you're taking Marco Silva, who I think is like a really good choice actually for a national team. Because I feel like most of the other guys, do you take Ten Hag?
No.
That was like a nope.
I think there's nothing that has proved that in his time there that has made that locker room any more normal than what it was before he got there. I feel like from some of the things that we've heard from some of it hasn't changed much, but maybe that's going back to the culture thing. And there is a possibility that at the national level, certain teams have just an embedded culture that's hard to get rid of because that's just what they know and who they are as a people. I'm not trying to generalize anyone specifically, but there can be sometimes a national team that has their personality or their character based off of one specific asset or one specific thing, and that's just who they are. That's how they identify, and you can't change that depending on whatever manager you bring in. Yeah.
I think, I mean, Kaz says has Ten Hag into the player at United.
But the question is a national team's manager the job to improve that player or to make that player do the right job for that tournament?
Yeah, I think that's the difference. Like Ryan is saying, he's still at. It must be the whatever. That's good stuff, by the way, because this is from last night. I don't know what he's doing, but that's some good stuff. Shared links. It's legal over here in Illinois. So coaching has nothing to do with grades like the last 18 months. I think we're talking about. I think here's the difference. Okay, here's the always making a cooking chef and food analogy, because as you would say, the weight issue there. So let's go. I feel like there's a difference between a club manager in terms of getting the ingredients they want and doing whatever the hell they want, and they can change things. I feel like the national team is, if you've ever watched, like, reminds me of like Chopped, or like, like those cooking shows where they just throw you like 10 ingredients. You're like, make something delicious, and then they have to work with that existing thing and make it happen. I feel like, especially with the limitations they get, whether it's these clicks or, like, the Turkish national team is doing great right now, despite missing Cengiz Ünder, who's injured, and Arda Güler, who's injured. Well, there's no way in hell you are not calling a healthy Arda to the Turkish national team. There's no way in hell. You can't be like, we don't, like, club would probably be like, we don't play with it like a number 10. You can do that at the club level, but you can't do that at the national team. You have to call Arda. So as your job, you have to make that work with a number 10. So you have to come up almost with a system, like looking at the ingredients you have, you almost have to come up with a system that's going to fit what you have as a core. Because it's not like suddenly a guy pops up. I mean, you know what you have for the next 2-3 years. It's not like, oh my God, nobody knew this guy was here in the Netherlands, let's call him up and stuff. So I think that's like the biggest challenge. So like, that's why when I was looking at the league, I kind of stopped at Ten Hag. I was looking at like the bigger clubs, which I don't know if you put United in that category, but still, like Arteta, Pep, Klopp. I feel like these are guys who they need to establish their system. They're not going to be able to just come up with something random if you just give them like, here's 16 players, make it happen.
I agree, and I think that's what it comes down to when we've talked about the national team manager thing before too, is finding that fine line between being a player's manager and a manager's manager. Right? There's you can only step foot on that line so much before you start meddling too much into one side or the other, and it's sometimes difficult to find that healthy balance.
Yeah, that's true. Brighton fired? Did they? I thought he replaced Potter, didn't he?
Well, fired. Potter left, and I guess. Yeah,
I don't know if Potter was.
I guess maybe that's what Ryan is saying, that Potter leaving was him being fired. But doesn't that point that De Zerbi took over the team that was already there and made them even a little better? Doesn't that give credit to the recruiting team and not so much the manager themselves? Because yes, obviously De Zerbi has been fantastic. Potter was fantastic, but Potter left, went to a big club on a big budget and failed. De Zerbi, we don't know if he gets the same opportunity. Would he do better at Chelsea? Maybe. We're not sure, but you have to give credit to the recruiting team and Brighton as a whole for having the players there in place. Every time they sell someone, they already have someone lined up behind that player to move it. That's not a De Zerbi thing. That's a Brighton thing. And I feel like De Zerbi has just been able to get even more out of the players that are there, but the players were already there.
Kyle says national team managers should know every single player in your national side 16 and over. What do you do on weekends? Go and watch players around the world is the minimum. Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? I mean, and like watching it live. I mean, I can't believe if this is true, like he has not been to Italy to watch those guys, because maybe he doesn't have a passport or something like that. He can only watch the guys who play in England. I don't know. Like, that's what you want, your national, because like I say, the core base is there. Like, it's not like suddenly changing. Whereas, as a club coach, you need a huge ass scouting team because the world is your basically markets. So it can be anybody anywhere playing in the other corner of the world. You can bring him over if you feel like he's going to be a fit. I mean, I guess you can do what they did with Matty Cash and convert him too if you find.
Hey, he's Polish. God damn it! What do you mean convert him? It's in his blood.
So yeah, I think that's why Marco Silva is a good name. We're gonna have to do this game. I'm gonna have to print a whole list. But off the top of my head, I agree that is a really, really good choice because most of the other ones I don't have confidence in terms of.
Where's the clapping sound?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, here you go. You can get used to that sound bites. If you're Henderson.
Why are they booing? I don't know.
That's the Henderson side. I should tag that as Henderson so everybody knows what it is. But yeah, I feel bad for him going like full circle over here. Okay, before we head out over here, let's do prediction in terms of national teams because it is the national teams. Will Poland make it?
No.
It looks tricky, doesn't it?
It looks so they need to beat Czechia, and they need Czechia to not get a result against Moldova, which I don't think there's one of those two things will not happen. And more, I think there's a chance that Moldova could maybe pull out a draw against Czechia because Moldova does have a chance to qualify still if they beat Czechia. So I think there's something to play for, but I don't think Poland will beat Czechia. And it's going to be even worse because it's going to be played in Poland. And it's going to be in front of the fans, and they're going to get stomped, and it's going to be bad.
That's an odd thing, by the way. I always feel like sometimes being home can have a negative impact because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of fans over there who are already angry, because of the entire situation. So the moment something goes south, it's very easy to. I always said this about going away to Arsenal, for example. Because you could turn the fans on them a lot easier, maybe like 3-4 years ago and stuff, because they were already angry. So you only had to just kind of like nudge them in the right direction to kind of like turn on them.
Yeah.
They need to preserve Dingus Day, says Ryan. Yes. Why don't they have Dingus Day?
I might have to buy back Dingus FC at this point. There's nothing to live for if they don't qualify for the fucking Euros. It's the easiest competition to qualify for. God.
Yeah, I was actually when I looked and I was like, oh, he's not going to be a happy camper because I saw they were actually losing 1-0.
They were.
And then I saw 1-1 and I'm like, oh, they're coming back. And then when it ended 1-1, I was like, oh, he's not going to be a happy camper tomorrow. But the good news is the Premier League is coming back. So at 6:30 in the freaking morning, we play every Saturday. I know there's surely called hand booze at the show. Yeah, I'm gonna have to label that totally differently so everybody knows what it said. Boo is not clear enough, I think so. But yeah, we'll be back. The boys will be back tonight. I will not be joining them, unfortunately. It's looking more and more like tonight. But Gally and Bickler will be here. We'll start switching back to Liverpool chat over here because we won't have to make up news like the media is doing right now, like literally just trying to come up with stuff to talk about. So they'll be able to talk a lot about looking ahead to the Everton game. I know like the Robertson situation and stuff like that because it happened after our show last week. I think we totally jinxed that with the Costas talk and Robertson talk, by the way. Be careful what you wish for. Yeah, Kaza says don't mention that game on Saturday. I can't do it. Well, it's Monday, buddy. I gave you the weekend off. When we talked Friday morning, I said take the weekend, don't think about it. But you know what? It's Monday. So swap your card, swap your Liverpool card, badge, punch in, and start thinking about the Saturday game. It's time to put in that shit. But join the boys tonight, 7 p.m. Central, 8 o'clock Eastern on the Monday Live podcast. And then I will be back Wednesday morning with the gang. So have an awesome